Increased consumption of fossil fuels such as coal, oil and natural gas has led carbon dioxide levels to rise dramatically over the last century, and still they continue to climb. But what effect could this increase in ambient CO2 concentration have on our natural environment and an ecosystem such as this? Well, we're here at the University of Birmingham's Institute of Forest Research to find out. In this private area of woodland in rural Staffordshire, an experiment of epic proportions is taking place. This is BIFoR FACE, the free air carbon dioxide enrichment experiment. The BIFoR FACE experiment consists of a series of ring structures, each of which is over 30 metres wide and reaches as high as the treetop canopy. Now, each of these towers is supporting a pipe which is pumping out carbon dioxide in order to artificially raise CO2 concentrations inside the ring to levels that climate change models predict we could be facing in 50 to 70 years' time. Plants, of course, utilise CO2 to make sugars during photosynthesis, and one of the aims of this colossal experiment is to examine how this extra carbon will impact not just the plants, but all organisms in this woodland ecosystem. With all good experiments, there should be a control. And so, as well as 3 test rings, there are 3 control rings, each of which has been built and designed in exactly the same way. But instead of pumping out CO2, these towers pump out normal, ambient air. How might researchers working here at BIFoR FACE go about investigating the effects of increased CO2 on biodiversity and species distribution? They could use techniques very similar to or identical to ones that we would be familiar with in the A-level biology classroom. For instance, we could use quadrats to sample areas from within both the control and elevated CO2 sites to detect any changes in the distribution of certain plants or slow-moving animals. It's important to remember that when using quadrats, the sampling areas chosen in both sites should be selected at random in order to avoid bias. There are also a number of pitfall traps located within the woodland to sample the distribution of insects and other invertebrates, as well as a variety of other experimental equipment. Another factor that researchers will be analysing is how elevated CO2 affects transpiration rate, as when the stomata, the pores on the underside of a leaf, open to take in CO2, water vapour can also be lost from a plant. You might be familiar with using a potometer for this in the classroom, but using a potometer to measure the transpiration rate of an oak tree is frankly easier said than done. What we can do instead is to use a thermal imaging camera to gauge transpiration rates, as evaporation of water from the surface of the leaf requires energy, decreasing leaf temperature. And so, here at BIFoR FACE, a multi-million-pound, world-leading research experiment, scientists are still using some of the same classical sampling techniques that we use in an A-level biology classroom, alongside some more advanced, expensive alternatives. And what has this experiment shown us? Well, construction of the FACE towers was only completed in 2016, and this experiment is due to run for over 10 years. During that time, scientists are going to have to gather and analyse an enormous volume of data. So, we may have to wait some time until we find out the answer to that question.